Good afternoon and welcome to the COMIT virtual happy hour. As ever, it's a virtual pub style environment for a friendly chat about hot topics and over a beer or whatever beverage you like. So a bit about COMIT. For those that are new to this, what is COMIT? COMIT is a community. It's made up of owners, contractors, solution providers and academia. COMIT has a history of developing and running projects and webinars with a focus on increasing productivity for better outcomes. By being collaborative with all of our stakeholders, we create value and enablement through process improvement and by setting up and delivering those all-important demonstration projects, of which we're about to talk about one today. The long-term aim of all this is to reduce capital project costs and reduce the cycle times. Okay, so a little bit about COMIT. I'll try to keep the acronyms to a minimum. Even as a seasoned professional, I still hear acronyms that I don't understand or have never heard of. So I'll try and keep them at the back. There are many aspects to consider here where tech will help you, and I've just covered a few areas. But projects in COMIT. We do run regular webinars, we run projects, we have a drone community, and we partner with other organisations, including the Group ASI for AWP conferences. And we also run, we haven't done for the past couple of years for obvious reasons, but we run a conference showcase for technology. And the next one that's coming up is the 31st of May, 1st of June next year, and that's in central London. I mentioned about events, community days. We've got 3 planned this year. First one took place in February. That was at Red Bull, sponsored by Siemens. The second one was at JCB in June, sponsored by Sunbelt. And the next one is coming up in October. Webinars, we've been running these now for several years. We picked up the frequency at the beginning of the pandemic, and we've run a considerable number since. And these are 3 of the events that we've run this year. I mentioned about drones. We have a very active drone community that was set up some 3 years ago. It started out as a project and now is a community in its own right. And I mentioned about projects, and I don't want to steal anybody's thunder here, but there's no better way to adoption than practically proving things in the field. So I won't say any more on that. Questions, if anybody's got any questions as we go, please feel free to put them in the chat box at the side and send them in, and I will ask them at the end. I'd also like to say a big thank you to those that completed the questions at registration. I'm not going to go into those now. We'll leave those to the chat at the end. So bear with us on that. And I'll now introduce the team. So we've got Steve Slater, Operations Manager at Waits Group. We've got Ant Morse, Head of Innovation at Virgin Media O2. We've got Colin Everson, Head of Innovation at BAM Nuttall. We've got Stephen Muldowney, Telecommunications Consultant at EMS. We've got Phil Cotton, Account Director at Nokia. Welcome. So I'm now going to hand you over to Steve, and Steve's going to take you through the introduction, and then we'll all come back in at the end of the session and we'll have Q&A. So Steve.
Thank you very much, Stuart, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for taking time to join us this afternoon. So this afternoon, we want to walk you through what Stuart said is one of the projects that we're working on, and it's worth pointing out that COMIT is one of the real purposes, one of the lifebloods of COMIT is demonstration projects, and so we're absolutely wanting to take the opportunity here with members, with others, with specialists in their area, and really prove what opportunities we've got with 5G in construction. So as Stuart said, the team, there'll be 3 of us going through the slides today, myself, Stephen and Ant. And we'll kind of walk you through and we'll take any questions at the end. Next slide, please, Stuart. Thank you. So it's worth thinking about what is the impact of poor connectivity to our construction sites. So I don't know how many of you were in touch with COMIT when we first looked at Rapid Site. I think this is the brochure that we pulled together probably about 8 or 9 years ago, something like that, where we just got 4G coming online, and we put all together a lot of solutions, and I think the problems are still the same, if I'm perfectly honest, but they're probably more complicated now because there are more opportunities now than what we had maybe 8-10 years ago. So if we just refresh ourselves on what the impacts of poor connectivity. Firstly, we can't get in touch with our back office applications. If we're not working to the most up-to-date information, then planning and things can go wrong. What happens when we don't have connectivity? We have to drive to different offices. We don't have the project scenes on site, and we have to revert to manual ways of working. And we're not now geared up for that. We've gone very, very paper-free. So it's very difficult to go back to those manual systems. And one of the key things really is we can't get the right people on the site at the right time when they're needed. If their systems can't work, then we're going to really struggle with them, which all leads to project delays, reduced profit, and obviously increased costs. So that just kind of sets the scene really of why connectivity is so important, and how we make sure we've got all our systems working for us as soon as possible, and hopefully from day one. Thank you, Stuart. Next slide. Thank you. So probably this time last year, we formed the project group to look at what opportunities and what we could do with regards to a project to look at proving some of the technologies and kind of getting buy-in, getting engagement, etc. So we reached out to some of our members, and we ourselves at Waits, we've got Ant, who's done a lot with COMIT from Virgin Media O2, and Stephen has worked quite heavily with COMIT from EMS. And we kind of got our heads together and we came up with a bit of a project brief. So we looked at some of the key things that we needed to. I'm not going to talk you through the complete brief, but just touching on a few things. Obviously, getting the Rapid Site, getting connectivity in the first place. Then, what other opportunities does that then give? We've got Internet of Things. We've got all sorts of things that can be improved by good connectivity. And as part of this project, we also want to look at a relatively new technology, certainly new to me, which is LTE M, which will absolutely sort of provide the vehicle for Internet of Things and a low latency sort of connection that will provide up-to-date information, little packets of information that will be absolutely key to getting all the information we need to and from our sites. So those are the, we want to have a look at making sure that we've got all the applications that are available, that they can work as soon as possible on our sites. So like I said, we kicked this off last year with a bit of a call to arms, really, and we've been delayed a little bit with COVID and various other things, but we're now in a position really to kind of hit the ground running with this, and with the help of some of the others on the call, and Phil and Colin, hopefully we can really drive some interest and get some movement on getting this running. Next slide, please, Stuart. So I got asked by our director of COMIT, what exactly is 5G and what is LTE M? And it's quite a complex thing, really. There's I mean, in its dumbest down term, it's the next iteration of mobile network, but they tell me it can do so much more. So basically what we did was we kind of like put together a short paragraph and hopefully this kind of gives it in a very simplistic term, because construction members like things to be in simple terms. You know, so hopefully this slide here kind of sets it out. It's basically faster networks that's going to give us more opportunities using better applications, etc. So you know, and the absolute you know, thing that this enables more than anything else is your rapid site, which, you know, going back to the you know, the solutions that we had, you know, in its simplest term, it's going to give us a fast network from day one, and potentially it's going to prevent or it's going to we're not going to need to get other networks in on smaller sites, so we can run these from start to finish, so we won't need BT. Yeah, that's all good. Next slide, please, Stuart. And this slide really kind of shows the journey that we've been on with regards to the mobile data. If we think back to the 80s, the big brick mobile phones, then we got clever GSM phones which do more digital things. You get messaging and stuff, and then in the 2000s we did a project with the EMS with the IMOs, and we put those we proved that through COMIT, which was a really good success. And we bonded SIMs together and all the rest of it, and yeah, the shepherd who I was with at the time worked with EMS, absolutely great. And now we're in a position where we're in between 4G and 5G. We've got 4G most places, but then we don't have great bandwidth where it's in heavily populated areas. And now we're just seeing the 5G coming to life, which is going to not only have increased bandwidth, but all sorts of things, all technical things which I don't fully understand, which will help us going forward. Next slide, please, Stuart. And I'll hand over to Ant now. Thank you, Ant.
Thank you, Steve, and thanks for having me along today. I think you mentioned a few things there, Steve, around it's faster and it's you know, the next phase, and it absolutely is. And we're no strangers at Virgin Media O2 to these next phases of technology. We've I've been in the organisation 28 years this year, and we've seen a number of different reiterations of technology come and go. One thing's for certain is we always progress. Technology, the speed of technology, the connectivity and what it offers people has always been a strong theme throughout. Progress for positive services. Interestingly, 5G for me is the first time where that will be true, but for a different audience. Sure, our phones will get faster, and as consumers, that's no bad thing, right? But actually, to download a film in a second versus downloading a film in a minute, probably not going to change my life too much. Where this service is going to be absolutely fantastic is in industry. It's the very first evolution of a mobile network that has been really designed and is now being configured and built to answer industry rather than just consumers. There'll be a perfect harmony of both being achieved, but ultimately this for us is about industry and enabling industry. It will ultimately lead to a more wire-free environment and less need for cables to be put to sites and sites to be connected. Sites will now be connected in a different way. I'll talk through a few use cases, but really just to say, without going into the technical details, of which I don't know all of them as well, Steve, so I'll avoid any of that. I know we've got some experts on the call who will be able to answer any super technical questions. But for me, it's around this thing of zero latency or low latency. And what does that mean? Well, it means that things will be able to interact in split seconds without any delay. So sending a message, it gets there. It's not vital if it gets there in a second or a millisecond. But actually, if you had two machines operating on a site, both connected and both relying on each other to be in harmony and lockstep, that zero latency is essential. Working with robots, remote robots, things like drone technology, you know, zero latency is going to be the priority for us. And that also is going to be the enabler. If you think of driverless cars, they need low latency or zero latency, so that if somebody steps out in front of them, it can interact instantly with no delay. Just interestingly, where it will help us as well in these environments where we're on video calls, it will change and transform that so that there is high definition, but also that zero latency will mean you can read emotion. Instant raise of eyebrows, shake of a head, smiles will be much quicker, as will voice as well. But if you can move us on to the next slide, please. So I think the next thing then is where is it going to benefit construction? What is it going to do for us as a community? Well, I'll give a couple of examples, and as Steve mentioned, we'd love to work with you and explore these in more details. There's nothing, innovation is a great topic, and it can be all-encompassing, but actually testing something and either failing fast or taking it through to a proof of concept is really where it comes strong. So where's 5G going to help? I mentioned about the zero latency. I talked about drones. Drones that can survey hard to access areas or just reduce the need for people to work at heights. Will rely on some of the 5G technology. The remote machines I mentioned about across a site and being connected, again, will rely on these types of services. Artificial intelligence and edge computing will play a significant role here, where literally the edge of the network is where all the performance and all the power and capability sits. Steve also mentioned LTE M, 5G, and tracking. Some specialists would say, well, why do we need that? Actually, you could track on assets on much lower bandwidth technologies, and you can. But what 5G will do is it will open up the capacity. It'll allow us to connect with millions and billions and trillions of devices that the analysts are suggesting are going to be connected in the future of the Internet of Things. Well, 5G is an enabler for that capacity. And I think as well, that we are moving into a more hybrid world as we find ourselves remote from our homes and offices across the country today. The next step is for us to be hybrid in terms of a location. So augmented reality and extended reality solutions will play a significant role. The point I'll stress here is it may not be our choice. I spend a huge amount of my role looking at the future, looking at what technologies may disrupt, evolve, bring opportunity. And one thing's for certain, somebody soon is going to launch AR technology, whether it's Apple, whether it's Google, someone's going to do it, or whether it's a startup or an independent. 5G will play a big role in some of the services that are provided to these augmented reality headsets. Also, it's already in use. We work closely with a number of organizations that use augmented reality headsets to see where assets and infrastructures are buried underground. We can share more information with you if that's of interest. And also as well, if we think to health and safety, we are deploying camera technology that looks at building sites and sites of interest, and then starts to build a pattern of activity. Has somebody tripped over and fallen? 5G and AI work in lockstep to understand if people are at risk. Also as well, are people wearing the right equipment? Have they got a hard hat on? What happens if they take it off? What happens if we find a hard hat with nobody in it? What do we do? What's the protocols and the actions? So yeah, it will do an awful lot for construction. Again, to that point I mentioned earlier, this is more than a consumer faster phone. Next slide, please. If you would. So I think I've probably covered most of this, but there is a massive benefits to this, and I think the most important one is the lack of infrastructure that's going to be required. We can do a lot of this over the air. A lot of this will not require sites to be connected. It will bring speeds of connectivity that we can't even get on most locations now through cables. Digitisation, it is going to make us more efficient. We're working with organisations who are using skilled labour sat at offices or in their homes, using augmented reality virtual twin technology to connect with young apprentices who have just joined the workforce and have low skill, and they're passing on the skills. So it's real life training, but making a far more productive workforce. And environmentally, well, there's less waste. There is less waste as we can be more efficient on our sites. I'll come on to LTE in a second. More efficient on sites, but also as well, the less of infrastructure. We have strong ambitions to be a carbon net zero by 2025, and we were always looking at how the network can be super efficient. Next slide, please. Okay, and I think on LTE, I just want to go a little bit further into what this is and why I'm personally, thrilled to see the introduction of these technologies. LTE is and I'll explain this as I see it working in construction. This is a technology like cellular. It can reach, a phone in pretty much any location. Yes, there's a few areas where we don't cover or where it's difficult to deliver a call or deliver a text message to. LTE technology goes a little further. It goes at a lower frequency, and allows us to give a very, very strong coverage footprint across the UK. It is capable then, as a result of that, to connect with things. And the exciting part for me is those things don't need to be powered. So if you think about tracking, and I hate to use the word, but it's the one we understand, it's the one we're familiar with, right? If we think about tracking a vehicle, it needs power. If you think about tracking an asset, it needs some form of power. With LTE, you don't. It can run on battery. So if you think about a pallet of bricks, you could pop an LTE sensor on this with a battery that could last a year, 10 years, 20 years if you wish, and then it becomes a trackable asset. These sensors are far and wide. You could have wristbands on people, so you know exactly where they are on a site. You could then use AI to say, well, actually, they're in an area of danger, do this, this, and this, and the protocols can kick in. It can be used for voice as well, which is a strong benefit of LTE over some of the other narrowband technologies that you may have heard offered. LTE can carry voice and it can be dynamic. So it can move around. It doesn't have to be a fixed asset, which is where in terms of locating goods of high worth, whether that's power tools or cement mixers or pallets of brick, you know, this has a very, very strong use case without needing power. And we're on that point, we're super keen to work with organisations to understand if there is, you know, something that you'd like us to track. The sensor market for LTE is massive. Too many to show you, too many to share. But if it's small and can hold a battery and can stick to something, we can probably follow it. We then have a dashboard at the back which allows us to find where these things are and do a number of different measures. Next slide, please. So I guess, you know, we've covered a lot about that. You know, this LTE technology is far wider reaching. It's secure. It's versatile. But it's not the only technology. There are other technologies that can complement. What we do at Virgin Media O2 is we look at the best technology for the job. So if 5G is enabling the site, great. If it's using artificial intelligence, if it's using camera technology and AI that needs that speed, fantastic. But if it doesn't, actually, what's the cellular networks? What's the LTE network? Where would LoRaWAN, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and also satellite and Sigfox and those different types of technologies? The portal we've built allows multiple uses, but I think for me, there's a super exciting opportunity for LTE capacity growth from 5G as well. But again, we'd be super interested to talk to any organisation that is interested in exploring this a little further. We've got lots of ideas. We now need use cases and tests, really, so we welcome those. But next slide, please, and I think that's over to Stephen.
Hi, everybody. Hi, it's Stephen Muldowney from EMS. Really pleased to be here today to talk to you about more the sort of project specific items related to the Commit to 5G project. EMS has worked before on a couple of Commit projects and always found them very useful to ways of understanding technology and testing out technology. So very excited to be engaged on the Commit to 5G project. As I say, I'm going to talk more about sort of project level, what it actually means. So in terms of what we've done, we've really phased the project into sort of 4 key phases with their own timeline. So there might be some overlap between them, but generally we're going to do it in sort of in series. So the initial bit is to look at that sort of speed. So how quickly can we get this network up and running, and how quick to deploy it? You know, construction sites are, you know, quite dynamic, and you know, we can't be waiting around months or weeks for networks to be put in place. You know, once the site is ready to be start work, then the network needs to be ready. So we want to basically, how quickly can we deliver, you know, a network, you know, to deliver just basic voice and data services. You know, first phase would be literally just like a network in a box. Literally, can we get, you know, and what sort of coverage do we get with that? And then the sort of second phase would be more sort of making that more permanent, physical, connecting the radios to physical infrastructure on the site itself. Phase 2 so is basically is about how do we start to now look at some of the sort of the challenges in the construction industry and how this technology can help. So here we're talking about how, you know, how can we make sure that the projects are preparing well, but also keeping to the program to complete on time. So what that really means, and we'll stood up for about 3 to 6 months, is really, you know, what does, you know, what benefits can we see by getting all this data from the people, the plant, the better communications, etc. So actually, does that make us more efficient? And thus, we're keeping to the site program plan. Phase 3 is then sort of the looking at saying, well, actually, and very similar to what Ant was talking about earlier, managing materials, and that will run for 3 months, from the 6 to 9 months period to about 3-month period. So, looking at challenges, are the materials being delivered are they to meet specification? Are they the ones that we procured? Are they being delivered on time? Are they being stored? Are the right quality? And that basically will, deal with some of those challenges in terms of that we talked about, the waste, efficiencies. Construction works on low margin. If we can reduce down sort of, waste of goods or oversupply of goods, or goods being sent at the wrong time, and so had to be stored, and productivity issues or may start to get wear, then that's benefit to the construction industry. And then we move to the final phase, which is sort of looking at basically in the last 3 months, basically how do we manage the site safely and manage people safely. We all know the construction industry is quite a dangerous environment, lots of challenges around that. And then how do we use this technology to basically allow us to manage the site, better, using again these LTE and 5G, LTE M and 5G networks. How do they, use that tech to basically ensure that we manage people more safely on that site? So reducing down incidents, reducing down lost periods where the site has to be closed down because of some incident on the site, which all affect overall, one key thing is by keeping people safe, but equally it also has an effect on the efficiency and costs. Next slide, please. So, they're the sort of phases. The next sort of one important question is those people that want to get involved in this is basically, well, what we're trying to achieve out of it, and what benefits do we think that those that engage in the project will get from being part of it. So firstly is it's really the sort of objective is to explore how everybody who's part of that system, whether that's sort of the asset owners, the contractors, the technology providers, how they can get benefits out of it. So everybody's got to get some benefit of it. It's either got to make more efficiencies, lower costs, or a combination of those, and also help deal with some of the challenges. If it ultimately it's just another technology, then it might as well stick with what's there today. So really want to see, well, how do everybody knows that sort of construction value chain, how are everybody getting out of that, and how do we also through it, so not only show that this technology can help with some of the challenges, but equally how can it stimulate some market development of new products that can come to the market that will basically the benefit of sort of that wider value chain, whether that's a telecommunication provider, the contractors work on the actual main contractors, or just subcontractors, etc. So what is the benefit to you if you were getting involved? Well, firstly, there are very few. There are only a couple of construction projects in the UK looking at this area. So where whoever's involved is going to have that real sort of got an early learning curve of what those advantages you can bring, and so they get the first mover advantage. Like I say, we're looking at saying how, it may be that what we trial out doesn't work, but actually what we learn from that is what doesn't work, what does and what doesn't work, and that will help people to find their potential, their products, test them out in a less sort of commercial world, a test environment. It allows basically to sort of, it's adding on to that, it's a low risk, low cost way of trying out the benefits of this. So for example, if you're a construction contractor, you're thinking of exploring this, you can get involved in terms of being able to sort of see that without having to make a large investment yourself. Also, you get the access to the wider group sort of knowledge base of being a part of that project, which you may have to sort of pay for if they're sort of in the sort of the wider world. And also people who've got applications or end devices can come bring that and test it out in this environment. Again, it's a low cost way of doing that without having to physically build a network themselves. And secondly, it's basically, finally, so thirdly, is basically it's how do we look at this project as sort of how does it bring new opportunities to my business, in developing new capability skills, way of actually encouraging more investment into the construction industry. So there's lots of benefits to everybody who's involved, from those that are providing sort of network, the equipment, the expertise, or just application of devices connected to the test network. Next slide, please. And as part of sort of the overall project, we've created sort of frequently asked questions. These are not all of them, but we'll just put a subset to show that what we've done. So if people want to get more information, then we can share the sort of frequently asked questions that we've come up with as a team around the project itself. Answering why LTE M, which I think we've already sort of talked about today, why 5G, just general questions about how things are going to be funded, the timelines. Can I be, if I'm not part of COMIT, or do I have to become COMIT? What are the timelines, etc., etc. So anybody who is interested in joining the project, we're happy to share these frequently asked questions with you following the call today. And if your questions aren't answered through the frequently asked questions, then you're more than welcome to contact any of the members on the call today. I'm sure we'll be able to answer your questions. Next slide. Yeah, and I'll hand back to you, Steve.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you, Ant, for going through those real examples of use cases, etc. So yeah, really, it's I think Stephen touched on this a little bit. Why should you get involved? I think the main thing, really, is we've never seen things change as fast as it is now. So we absolutely need to be looking at new technology. How can we improve what we do? And I think the quote there, I think, was from Ken Blanchard, who basically said, "None of us is smarter than all of us," which is absolutely right. Here we've got a group of specialists in both construction and in technology, in the sport, the COMIT forum. So yeah, we've got a real great opportunity here to do some really good use cases, prove the technology, and as Stephen said, without the cost, without the tag, the price tag, because we've got access to systems and technologies, and yeah, we can do it for a fraction of the cost. As we know, construction doesn't have high profit margins, and certainly doesn't have very large R&D budgets. So certainly, it's a great opportunity here to get involved and work with Ant, Stephen, and myself, and others to make this work. And hopefully we can get some really good project outcomes here. We can write it up, we can share it across the community. So yeah, if you're interested in joining the project, please do reach out to myself or Stuart on the details below, and I'll hand back to Stuart for the panel Q&A.
Thanks, Steve. So question time, if I can invite everybody to come back in now. Phil, Stephen, Colin, Ant. There we are. And we have some questions. So thanks everybody, and thanks to all the participants for listening in, and also I'll say again for sending in some questions. We've just got a couple of questions here that have landed, but please do feel free to send them in. One question that crops up, Fran, if you're still on the call, Fran Raybook, any discussion, this is a statement really, I think, any discussion of 5G should include new challenging tech, e.g. LoRa,
LoRaWAN.
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 Maybe you've missed the character out of the spelling there, Fran. / Wi-Fi 6.
Yep.
I know I said I wasn't going to talk acronyms, but I'm not even sure what Wi-Fi 6 is. Maybe who can answer that one? Go on, Stephen, jump in.
Yeah, so I absolutely agree. The issue is that we have to limit the scope of it for just cost and timeline perspective. So it's not that we're saying that the technology we talked about today are better in some ways. Actually, what we're trying to do is, you know, the whole what you do is you match your use case, what you've got, your challenges, your use case against the technology, and not say let's start with this. But you know, for the 5G commit, we need to sort of narrow down our focus, and so we just focused on these technologies. But that's not to say that those other ones don't have a role to play and maybe future projects. But I think just for, you know, the ability to actually run a project, you know, we just need to narrow down our focus. We pick those particular areas, and yeah, but we can also look at those in the future.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. So I've got one question here, and this is really around what 5G has to offer, and I suppose it's maybe only fair to refer to what 3G did in terms of digitizing the site and increased speed. Basically what it is, 3G could handle a lot, especially in small amounts of updated information. But what is the benefit of 5G over 3G? I guess, and you covered quite a lot of that. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, absolutely, and you know, I think it's a really valid point, and I think, you know, I mentioned before, you know, what will it do for consumers? You know, is being very candid. You know, it'll make things a little bit faster, but actually, you know, brilliant service in 3G and 4G that we have already. So, it really is about that next phase of capacity around connecting more things, the scope of new services and enabling the services that require much faster connectivity, such as artificial intelligence and some of the computer vision technologies that will look at sites and make various different things. So for me, the core connectivity is brilliant, and we forget that, I guess, sometimes, and it's a really good point that you mention it. But you know, 3G moved to 4G, got faster. Yes, 5G also gets faster, but not sure we need it for a lot of the things. But when we do need it in these low latency areas, that's when it will really be the enabler.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anne. Phil, do you want to come in?
Yeah, so I think one of Anthony's right, really, that there's a lot of use cases for you know, just people normal people who want to use the phone to make phone calls and watch Netflix, etc. But actually, enterprises, construction, etc., factories, they actually need uplink. So uplink, this is actually feeds to cameras and taking feeds from machinery, because there's a lot of data out there that at the moment we don't get access to. And this really is getting access to that data, getting access to your machinery, being able to know how it's performing. That requires what we call uplink rather than downlink. And this is where really 3G was, the migration from 2G to 3G really was still get voice link with a little bit of data. Whereas when you're moving on towards 4G and now 5G, this is where actually for industry, it's the uplink capacity as well, not necessarily the downlink capacity. It's actually what you can pick up from the equipment on site, because then it gives the construction companies the ability to analyze that data, get access to what that machine is doing, analyze, do something with it, and work out perhaps that one of those machines is operating less efficiently than the others, and you can then start to act on that data. And so 5G is giving you that difference. It's being, whereas actually it's the difference in the uplink. That's what enterprise need. That's what businesses need. Not necessarily lots of download for Netflix. It's the uplink capacity. That's a real difference.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Phil. I've got a question here which is aimed at contractors. And Colin, I'm going to ask you to have a look at this one. What proportion of sites do you find have no existing 3/4G connectivity via the existing public infrastructure? Is that something you can answer?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a large proportion, but I guess it's significant enough for it to be an issue. I know that certain stretches of HS2 through the Midlands, you know, a mobile network operated black box, there's just not the population there to support it. Yet we're undertaking, you know, massive construction projects, and like we said, the construction industry now is reliant on connectivity. We've been driving forward all these digital tools, and internet connectivity is now sort of, you know, the next essential service. You need water and electricity to make your brew, but, you know, actually everyone is now demanding high-speed connectivity. So yeah, it's not a large proportion, but it's significant. And yeah, in our experience, we've got projects where, you know, connectivity on day one has been a challenge.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that, Colin. Sorry, go on, Phil.
Can I jump? And so this is where, so I've been running private wireless networks for Nokia for the last 2.5 years. And so that's a great example of where the likes of Waits or BAM could actually develop themselves their own private wireless network. So in that black hole, for a period of about 3 to 5 years, you can become your own private wireless network, your own mobile operator. And we're working a lot actually with VMO2 deploying private mobile networks for customers in those areas. Because actually, if you're looking now 5G, quite a tanker to turn for a large operator like VMO2 to suddenly deploy a massive load of 5G masts in an area. Whereas now, what we're working with VMO2 and other operators on is actually so you can actually have your own mobile core on your site. You'll work with VMO2 with the spectrum, and you'll create your own bubble of connectivity within that site. That then means that you get that ubiquitous connectivity across your site, but all that data then really importantly stays on your site. That not only gives you that massive security bonus, but also the latency that Anthony was talking about earlier on. Just law of physics says that if your applications are actually located on your site, the law of physics, we've got 5G networks now which are sort of what you'd call pop-up networks, which are given around an 8 to 10 millisecond round trip delay. Now, what we're doing at the moment, we've just deployed one at the Nissan site, for example, and they've just managed to reverse remotely a HGV with a truck. Apparently, that's supposed to be one of the most difficult things to do, but they've just done that using 5G, using Ofcom spectrum. So that's using the sort of around 8 milliseconds. So the nirvana of 1 millisecond low latency, there aren't that many applications out there that require it. So 8 milliseconds is actually something we've just done and reversed a HGV truck into a bay. That's very hard to do, apparently.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Steve,
HS2s.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you. Steve, do you want to come in and say anything to that question?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely interesting. I mean, we just started rolling out 5G, and it's probably we're looking at 50% coverage is 5G enabled for our sites, and then as we say, we're probably about 10% where we don't have any I say we don't have coverage. It doesn't work. Yeah, there isn't enough coverage to make it work. So yes, you might get a couple of bars on your mobile phone, but it's not. You're not going to run applications from computers. And as Colin said, that we're now so reliant on it. And what happens is we start losing time because everybody has to go home. They come to site and they can't operate, so they have to go home and they have to update their plans, their programs, or to the local office. And so, not very green either. Traveling all these extra miles for the connectivity is bonkers. So no, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think this is where a private wireless network, working with the likes of VMO2, and this is what we're doing. We've just put one in, for example, in the Southampton port. Exactly those reasons. Believe it or not, they didn't have good coverage. But if you're setting up a site in Wales in the middle of nowhere, you create yourself a private wireless network using spectrum from VMO2. You then can do the LTE M with VMO2 using the M devices. And when you're finished, you pack it away, you take it somewhere else. And that's the way forward.
Go on, Ant.
Sorry, Phil, I was just going to say as well, one point that's often asked as the VMO2 representative on the call is, to the point you asked Colin, what do we do about coverage? Well, as in my introduction, I mentioned that this is a network that is going to be driven by industry. It's also going to be rolled out by industry as well. If you think to the previous reiterations, the network we've had to build, whether it's 2G, 3G or 4G, usually you've paid more as a subscriber. So I'm talking about us as consumers, but 53 million people paying slightly more for faster speeds and more data allowed us to roll out these networks in the past. Here, this is a faster reiteration, requires a new network, but nothing's gone up. All this does is increase the speed of your network. Consumers, may not want to pay extra for that service, but the reality of the tariffing model means they don't. So with the dilemma that the networks have, and I think I probably speak for all networks, is how do we roll out a network without an increased opportunity of increased subscription? Well, we roll it out in areas such as private network, and also we invest £1 million a day into the net, over £1 million every day into the network. But to speed and accelerate 5G adoption and network rollout, if industry are launching and building private networks, whether that's in a construction site or whether it's in a supermarket. So if you think about supermarkets being full of robotic trolleys and augmented reality goggles that you can go around and find out where the bread and milk is, they will all need private networks to guarantee service. As those networks are rolled out, it will underneath that be building the infrastructure for the public 5G network as well. So we think that it's happening is that industrial and commercial rollouts of 5G private networks is going to then build the wider 5G network that consumers use. So for me, I think this is going to be, it's still in its infancy, limited number of private networks, but I think that's going to accelerate at pace, and that will then by nature cover some of those areas that are not covered. I will just stress as well, LTE doesn't require the 5G network. It is rolled out in most of the country already, but it is using more the bandwidth of technology that's already there. So to manage assets that are dynamic and moving around, or to provide voice in a very hard to reach area, LTE can do that without the necessary 5G private network.
Brilliant, thanks. Can I, sorry, Phil, just let me stop you a second. I want to go to Colin and just say to Colin, or ask Colin, with the project that you've already been involved in, has it given you the opportunity to look at other technology that you can bring in and use? Have you got to that point yet?
Yeah, I often describe the 5G projects, and we've got 2 private 5G standalone networks operational. I often describe it as a sort of technology Trojan horse, because now that we've got that network established, we've started to explore other technologies maybe earlier than we would have done anyway. So we've got the Boston Dynamics Spot robot on site, which we've got connected to the private 5G network. This week we had a live video stream from a drone. So I guess what it's doing is getting that technology in front of the people on the project, so it's not just something in the lab, but it's maybe getting that technology to site a bit faster. And there's so much to do. It's such an immature area of technology that we just need to try it a lot more, and to help it evolve and to help it to be a going concern. In our experience, it's not yet ready for commercial deployment. The technology immaturity is just sort of not there yet in order for it to be a reality. So we need just to do more projects like this just to try and drive it all forward and force adoption in the industry.
The connectivity for me and others that I've associated with has always really stopped any sort of reach out or bringing in of new technology. And I think with having the 5G and creating robustness, I think it's going to be the path forward. And I think, if we can get some positive outcomes from this project, then I think we're on a winner. I mean, it's great that there's an awful lot being done now, and hopefully with our project we can bring in some more interest. I just go back to the question we got on the 3/4G connectivity and existing infrastructure. Dave, if you're still on the call, I hope that answered your question. If you want to add to that, please drop me a line on there again. Come back to Phil. Phil, you were going to say something else there at the end. Do you want to finish that off? Doesn't matter. Don't worry.
I can't remember what I was saying.
Okay, it doesn't matter. No worries. The one thing I was going to say here as well is this is a question again from Fran. He's left now. He had to go to another meeting, but he's fired a load of questions in, and one of them is he starts off with 5G as an image problem. Now, Fran is Fran is based in Philadelphia, in the US, and I don't know whether that's an image problem there or everywhere or what, but he said it's got an image problem viewed as just a faster speed, but need to educate the market better. Anybody want to come in and comment on that? Stephen, go on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like anything, there has been quite a bit of hype around it, and I think, you know, Colin sort of said it's still quite mature, and I think, you know, maybe we, you know, as an industry, we've talked too much about sort of the future benefits, and we talked too much about sort of the what it could do in the future, and people get quite tired of that sort of approach, you know, jam tomorrow in that. So I think that there is a sort of, I don't disagree with that, you know, and I'm as guilty as anybody. You know, we were doing a trade show the other day, and it's like, well, if you just put LTE or mobile networks, then yeah, it's interesting. Put 5G, people will stop. And it's sort of, in one way, it is we're guilty around it. But I think that what we're talking about here in terms of the project and the benefits, I don't think they're overhyped. You know, what we've done is try to quite be realistic about what we want to achieve. You know, like first bit around the sort of quick startup, they're realistic. You know, we're not talking about trying out too futuristic. And the way that we've phased the project is to sort of try and sort of back end some of the more difficult and more advanced functions and features to be tested for that reason, so that give a time for, you know, this thing to mature even over the life of this project. And that means we're not going to be starting day one with some of the advanced features, as we know that 5G has a number of different releases, and each of those releases will bring different functionality. So what we're trying to focus on is what's available in this project today is really much around what is available today in the specifications as we stand, and not look too far in advance. So hopefully this project isn't going to be sort of too high on the hype scale.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Colin, thanks for that question. What is the panel's view of Open RAN, that's RAN, versus traditional network approached, i.e. closed deployments? Colin, do you want to give me the what the definition of RAN is?
Well, considering my my glossary of terms is vastly increased over the last few months, and I'm hopefully I will be corrected if I get it wrong. So an RAN is a radio access network, and an Open RAN, I believe, is that where you have a mix of vendors and technology providers. So, like for instance, if you're a consumer like me, I can buy a phone and it's connected to EE or Vodafone, etc. Whereas an Open RAN, you have a selection of providers that provide different aspects of the network. How's that for a civil engineering definition?
No, it's pretty good. I mean, the Open RAN it's made of different components as well. So traditionally, in a normal radio, you have like a baseband unit and a radio unit. So they're the two main bits. And in Open RAN, they start to break down some of those functionalities into different components. So you could have different where before you'd have quite an end-to-end type architecture from one vendor. The Open RAN is supposed to be you could pick and choose your different vendors. In sort of the world that we are in the project, then it's really we're agnostic to the radio. The radio is just that whether it's a traditional radio or or it's an integrated small cell, or whether it's actually an Open RAN. We're really not trying to test out in our project the different types of radio technology, more about sort of the bit that they provide, the connectivity. So we're really more, from our perspective, we're not going to be testing out, focus too much on the different types of technology. Radio technology is more about sort of the use cases, being able to connect that connectivity, whether actually we've got a small cell connected to a core, or whether actually it's an Open RAN.
Thanks, Stephen. Does that cover it, Colin? Is that okay? Yeah. I've got another question here. One we've just got 5 minutes left. So one of the questions is from Kevin. Thank you, Kevin, for sending this one. Would you recommend the use of ISIM/ESIM, so it's ISIM versus eSIM, in Internet of Things devices using 5G/LTE M? Stephen, that sounds like one for you. ISIM versus eSIM.
I'm not a big expert on this, but in terms of where we are with eSIMs, but they absolutely have a role to play in sort of private mobile networks. Think about the ability that you go to a site and you just see a QR code and you download it, and that gives a SIM to your phone. So that those they have uses for it. It's still sort of not a technology. There's only a few phones that support, a growing number of support that it's for eSIM. It has to be, certainly the public network has to be supported by the public mobile network as well. So yeah, it certainly is a technology that I think has a role to play, because it brings that flexibility, being able to have multiple SIMs simply onto a phone, so you can roam in and out of a public and private network as such, potentially. So yeah, it has a role to play, but it's certainly not something that certainly it's not something that we've had a conversation today around investigating as part of the project, but of course absolutely can be.
Okay.
So one of the future uses of that, so let's again imagine that there was a private wireless network, a contractor had its own private wireless network. You will then have subcontractors coming onto that site, and you may want to give them access to your private mobile network, because you will want the data from whatever they are doing to automatically upload into your BIM. So you'll need to give them access to your private mobile network. So at the moment, you can give them a SIM, and that if they've got a dual SIM card, like sort of the phone I have here, then you can put that into the second SIM slot, and then they can access your private mobile network. In future, they'll be able to do, as you say, Stephen, they'll be able to then access via eSIM your private wireless network that little bit easier. So it'll give contractors the ability to add and remove people from their private wireless network much easier.
Brilliant.
So again, the use case is far more towards industry rather than consumer. I think everything we're talking about here really is focused on industry. And the use cases or the uses of it are a lot different for industry than they are for sort of consumer, and the value is a lot greater.
Okay, I've got another question here. This is on investment. Thanks for this. Does the panel think there's sufficient government investment and R&D in this area? Who wants to take that one? And go on.
Well, I'll let Phil last couple of minutes as well. But yeah, I think really there is a significant investment in areas of digital inclusion, and I think that's a real positive side of things. I think when it comes to investment in lots of the industrial applications of 5G, I think that really is falling to us to look at those proof cases, proof of concepts, and really drive them forward. But there are a number of initiatives across a number of areas, such as I think there's a £200 million innovation fund made available by Ofwat to look at innovation projects in the water industry, and that's just one of many. So I think looking for them, finding the right use case falls to us, and then looking at where the funding is probably going to be the course to approach that.
Okay, Phil, do you want
to? I was going to say, really, there are two sides to this. There's a technology, and that's where the likes of Nokia are investing literally billions in R&D. But then it's actually it's the use case. That's where. So we saw lots of investment by the government last year. A lot of, in terms of 5G innovation projects, and we were across a lot of those. A lot of that has reduced, but now it's all down to the use case, and that's where the investment needs to be. And the use case will then drive the end devices, and the end devices will drive it becoming a lot more practical. So I'm really keen to work with anyone on this forum that ultimately it's the end-to-end environment that we need to develop, the whole ecosystem.
Appreciate that, Phil. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to leave the final question to Steve now before we wrap up and close out. What? Just remind us again, Steve, what type of organisations are we looking to get engaged in the project?
So what we're looking for ideally, as everybody has said on this call, we need the use cases. So what we're looking for is we're looking for contractors, so contractor challenges, so we can set up a pop-up 5G site, so we can look at some of the other things that we've talked about, materials tracking, etc. So really we're looking for contractors mainly. I think we've got quite a lot of support from the vendors, from the technologists, and I think once we get these, and I think it's worth me saying, Stuart, that this is one of many projects that we're going to do under the Commit to 5G. So this is the initial project. So I'm sure that things will spin off this. As Colin said, we're going to get some of the technologies that are now possible once we've got the connectivity to the site and we've got the networks established. Then we are going to be able to get the advanced solutions that are going to really make a difference and drive construction forward. So I think really, Stuart, at the moment we're mainly looking for contractors. If there are some technologists out there who think they can support us in this, absolutely, please be in touch. But in the main, we're looking for contractors to be able to provide the sites, the locations, to be able to move this forward.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that. And I'm just gonna wrap up now. I mentioned at the beginning we had the questions at registration. There's some follow-up required there, and if that's okay with everybody, we will follow up. There's definitely need for more information, and some of that will have been provided this afternoon. So thank you again for that. I also want to say thank you to our sponsors, which is Virgin Media and Snugs. Please join the conversation. The recordings are available through Commit, so we'll make that available as soon as it's downloaded. Thank yous to the panelists, the attendees. See you all again on the 29th of July for the blockchain-enabled health passports that will transform occupational health and safety for everybody in construction. And that QR code will take you straight to the registration if you want to give you a second for that. I also want to talk, and I'll not bring the slide up until you've done the QR code connector. The 6th of October is the next Commit Community Day. If you want to attend that, get in touch. If you remember, you know the drill. It's in Milton Keynes. It's an organisation called Nifty Lift, and the whole day is supported by Sunbelt. So I'm just going to show you that, and I'm going to say thank you. Have a great weekend. But before we do, final comments going around the room. Stephen, anything from you? Anything you'd like to add?
No, just really looking forward to chatting to people who want to join and sharing the benefits of the project.
Ant?
I'd echo what Stephen said. Yeah, look forward to working with you.
Brilliant, thank you. Phil?
Yeah, ditto. Enjoy the discussion.
Colin?
I think there's huge opportunities offered by 5G, and more of us just need to get involved and try it out.
Brilliant. Steve?
I'd like to thank everybody who's been involved today. I think it's good to promote the project, and I think, as Colin said, we absolutely do need to do much more to take advantage of the technology and the opportunities it brings. So thank you very much, everyone.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for joining us, and everybody have a great weekend, and we'll see you all on the next one.
Thanks very much. Thanks, now.
Cheers.
Cheers,
Cheers all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.